I started Spotify when I was 23, and so a single guy in my 20s, New York was just a much more fun place to be than Silicon Valley.
Here with Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify. Thank you so much for joining us, enlightening us on everything that's happening. I mean, it's such an exciting time at your company. I know there was news that you just distributed $100 million in one quarter to creators, and this has become such an important space for podcasters, obviously musicians, and I'm just curious to get your take why you think creators are so drawn to Spotify and how you created that flywheel that's really kept them coming, through years.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first and foremost. I think it really starts where we started the company and the ethos of the company. So we started the company back in 2006, and it was really based on this simple idea. We wanted to give consumers what they wanted, which is whatever thing they were interested in at the moment of their time and to soundtrack their life. And creators an ability to connect with an audience, grow that audience, and monetize. Because what we realized at that time was the internet was kind of in its infancy. Piracy was sort of everywhere back in 2006. And we thought that actually, these creators are really spectacular individual people who want to connect, want to grow, and we want to create that platform for them where they can thrive. And as you say, we're now obviously 19 years in from that journey. We are in music, the single biggest contributor to the music industry. And in podcasting, we this quarter alone paid out over $100 million back to creators. So I think the model's really working.
I mean, clearly. And how are you, as you think about moving forward, not just having a winner-take-all scenario, but making sure that you're having everyone have a voice, and even some of those micro podcast creators who are just beginning their careers? How are you thinking about supporting them?
Well, I think it really comes down to just enabling, as you say, more voices on the platform, but also enabling them to more easily use the platform for their good. So what we're constantly trying to do is we're trying to reduce friction. So if it's on the consumer side, it's everything from how do I find whatever I might be interested in at that moment, how do I consume it on my favorite devices, whether I'm in my car or whether I'm in my house or whether I'm on the go. And on the creator side, it's how do I publish, how do I monetize, how do I grow my audience on the platform too. And we're constantly just trying to remove the friction so that it's easier and easier for both creators to work with us and consumers to be able to find whatever they may be interested in that moment.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to get your take as well, because everyone's talking about AI constantly. There's people who are very afraid of it, people who are very excited about it. And one thing that we've seen even in the last 6 months or so is AI podcasts, where basically a Siri-like voice has an entire podcast, and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's going to have a bigger footprint on Spotify, or do you think that people maybe won't care as much about an AI podcast?
Well, I think it'll have a place, but I actually believe while, of course, AI is going to be a much bigger part than what it is today, I think ultimately what's so exciting about Spotify and the creators we have on Spotify is we're going to be drawn to the actual thing that makes us human too, which is the human element, which is the artist, which is the story behind about the person that's doing it. So where I'm the most excited is actually around, using our platform and enabling them to allow artists to communicate more about themselves, connect in very different ways, whether it be, video is a great example where we both on podcasting enable more video now as another way of just showcasing themselves. But on the music side, we also now started having full-length music videos, and more of the artists are both playing around with the shorter form video format we have and now uploading more and more music videos onto the platform too. So these are just some of the ways that I think we're allowing artists to be able to express themselves. And I think that in the end means while a lot of consumption in raw hours will be aided by AI, I still think that sort of unique human storytelling is here to stay and going to be a very, very important part of Spotify's future.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Another part that you're deploying AI is with the algorithm and making sure that people get the content they want. What else is next for you on that front with algorithm, with AI?
Well, I still think we have a long way to go because if you really think about it, you kind of have to start in from the end. Like, what would the perfect Spotify look like? Well, the perfect Spotify would just serve you that one thing you know you want in that moment. And while we're good, the reality is you can probably yourself at this moment search and find what you want for at least 30 or 40% of the use cases. So we still have some ways to go before we're at that point where we can just serve you that magical thing that you didn't even know that you liked better than you can do yourself if you really put in the work for it. So I think over time with AI, we're going to get a lot better at that. But I think that there's so many other things that we're going to leverage AI for as well. You mentioned one of these things, take on the book side with voices too. There's a lot of books today where they aren't yet in an audiobook format. It may be very expensive for the author to put it out there. So can we play a role there in enabling more of these authors to be able to express themselves by having more audiobooks on the service, which is, by the way, the fastest growing segment of the book market for authors too. So there's so many ways, both on the creator side and the consumer side, that we can leverage AI to just create a better experience.
Yeah, and I know we were speaking of before as well, just despite the fact that people now have the attention span of a goldfish, people still want to listen to 4-hour podcasts, which I think if somebody had told me that years ago, I'd be like, no way. Do you think that there is an appetite for even longer content? Like, what do you see coming next when it comes to podcasts and length and how people are consuming media?
So what's interesting for me is it's the bifurcation, right? As we talked about before, you both have more shorter form content than ever before. But what's really cool about the internet is it also is a place for niches. And so what may seem very, very small in one place, because it's now on a global scale, in the case of Spotify in 183 countries around the world, that enables something that may seem quite small to actually be very, very big on a global basis. So one of my favorite examples, in the US, it's a very big thing, country music, right? But what is really cool is that country music now is starting to grow in a big way, even internationally too. So what may seem like a very quintessential American thing are now becoming a global thing, and people in Europe are now listening to country music, and people in Southeast Asia are listening to it as well. And so there's all these things that may start in a very local way that then grows and becomes a national thing, that then grows to become a global phenomenon. And so I think that there's so much we can do and that we haven't seen yet in terms of exposing these types of things. And that means, for instance, if it is someone that has a passion about something, a deep conversation about a particular topic, even though it may be 3 or 4 or 5 hours, sometimes that can be reached by millions of people around the world that share that interest. So long-form content is here to stay, short-form content is here to stay. The most important thing we can do, however, is to package that content in ways that people find it appealing and want to engage with it, because the hardest problem now in this world where we have so much content around us is finding that right thing and choosing, especially when it comes to new creators, being able to provide them the opportunity to connect to new fans.
Yeah, and how you were talking a bit about the algorithm, that it's not exactly where you want it to be. Do you think it will be a year from now?
I don't know that it will be there a year from now, but our goal is obviously to make it so that we, get it to that perfect state where we just know exactly what you're doing, so, to the point where even if you tried, you just couldn't get a better job. So my sort of dream vision for where we end up with Spotify would be, if you think about music, that we will give you that perfect song for every moment of your life. So think about it, it's like, if we could soundtrack your life, what would that soundtrack be like? That would be my dream. And I think if we can make that happen, not only would Spotify play an even bigger role in your life, but I think it would be an amazing thing for all the artists as well, because there will be a lot of them that will get the opportunity to be able to make their art.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines I've heard recently is, I'm a millennial, so I can't invite you to my home, but I can have you on my podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is so much saturation, and yet, to your point, what you're saying, this is sort of a increasingly expanding audience. I mean, and so to hear you talk, maybe the space isn't even as saturated as it will be, and there's even more people who want to listen. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, podcasting has grown. I mean, just 5 years ago, when we started getting into podcasting in a big way, it was about 20% of Americans that really knew what podcasting was. And today we're at the point where it's about 50% that engages with a podcast sometimes. But that means that there's still 50% of Americans that don't, right? That's the first thing. But then even more on a global basis, America is early on this trend. But when you look at many of the other markets, we're just very, very early on in where this will come. And I think that there will be more voices from around the world. And again, if we look at something like AI, we're just in the early days for this, but imagine if you're a creator and you're the world expert at something, it could be gardening or whatever, but you happen to be Indonesian. Today, there's a language barrier, and it will be very hard if you don't know English to be able to get to a world stage and be able to express your knowledge and skill. But with AI, it might be possible in the future where you speak in your native language, and the AI will understand it and will actually real-time translate that to whatever the language is of the person listening or watching you. And I would hear it in this person's voice, but it's like that person spoke English. Now, what will that do to the future? What would that do to creativity? What would that do to knowledge sharing? What would that do to entertainment? I think we're just in the very early innings of figuring that out.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because you look at like K-pop, there's so many people who are obsessed with it, and most people in America are like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
And when you talk about these audiences growing, I want to talk a bit about the role that you guys have really played in free speech and distribution. Because, I mean, so much has obviously changed in the last few years, but there was a lot of censorship on a lot of tech platforms. And I think you were very unique in sort of not succumbing to that. And you had voices who at the time were sort of slammed as controversial, like Joe Rogan. What made you decide to say, no, we really want to stand with him and continue to work with him?
Well, I think we approached this that we fundamentally believe that there should be more debates and more discussions in the world, because that's fundamentally where that will advance society forward. That's where we start. And for me, certainly when you look at sort of the height of COVID, as a person that originally is from Sweden, what was clear to me is we were talking about this, and the whole debate really, certainly in America, was there's one answer to this. Well, and this is the science, and this is what the experts are saying. But actually, what I knew from my home country was that what Sweden believed was the right thing was totally different. For instance, we didn't do shutdowns, we didn't have mask mandates, and so on and so forth. And so even the experts couldn't agree on this issue. So for me, it was actually kind of an obvious one, because this wasn't as black and white as some people try to make the issue. I think it was much more of a gray zone, and therefore it was obvious to me that we should allow more debate around this. We should have more things. And it was such a new phenomenon.
Right.
It happened like overnight, and the whole world kind of shut down. And obviously it was incredibly serious, and there was a lot of risk at stage. But I still fundamentally believe that through more debate, through allowing more conversations to happen, and we want to be that place, Spotify, where we have a lot of voices on our platform, from everything from the music side, and this is really where we came from, where you have music styles like punk music in Myanmar, which is revolting against the regime, or rap music that, where it's really important to be able to express yourself. And so for us, it was just kind of an obvious thing. And I think the rest of the world sort of made it a much bigger issue than what it was internally. For us, at least, it was just really the right thing.
Totally, totally. And it's interesting that sort of Americans like to think that that's our entire thing, is free speech, and yet a lot of the American tech companies sort of didn't follow through on that. Would you say free speech is one of your key values at Spotify?
Well, I would say having more debate and more conversation is our core value, and this is kind of again, this isn't for me. This is an American thing. This is like something we do everywhere in the world, and so it's kind of been ironic that it's become sort of a big hot topic here, and but for us, it's like we take our role incredibly serious about having this platform where we have over 20 million creators.
Yeah.
And we don't know what all of these people are saying or thinking, but we want to enable more voices. We want to enable more artistic expression. We want to enable more conversations. And so we have this view, not just in the US, but really globally, where we engage with governments around the world on this, where we're trying to advocate having more debate, having more voices, fundamentally being a very positive thing to move us forward as a whole, as a society and community. So yeah, that's kind of our view.
Yeah, totally. And you make a good point. I mean, music can be revolutionary. Any of these art forms
It
can
has
affect
been.
change.
It has been. Look at the 70s in the UK, where you had the punk music be the revolt against the regime. Look at rap music as sort of the projects and what was happening there. Police brutality, all of these things. Actually, music has played a very important role. The Vietnam War with Bob Dylan, music has always been sort of at the forefront of these things, and really kind of pushed on societal issues. So that's our heritage, and then obviously with podcasting, that just felt like a natural extension for us.
Yeah. I want to speak about sort of fair competition, antitrust, because as somebody in news, this is something that has impacted our industry pretty tremendously, and just learning more about your company, doing some research. I mean, you guys have really faced a lot of challenges. Being an innovator, being a relatively, now you're a more established player, but not as established as some of these behemoths. What is your view on the landscape right now as you're trying to continue to expand your footprint and innovate? Do you think that we have fair competition right now?
Yeah, so first and foremost, maybe kind of to take a step back, like we've always competed against some of the biggest tech companies in the world. And for us, it's the only thing we care about is having a level playing field.
Yeah.
Because if we have a level playing field, we're pretty certain that, we feel good about the product we're building. We know consumers love that. We know creators want to express themselves on our platform. So that's kind of where we start. But what's really unique about this moment in time is, if you think about the world at the moment, we talk about the internet, as this kind of one thing. But the reality is most people today access the internet through their smartphones. And they access the internet through apps. And when it comes to that, there's really two companies that controls this whole way that people are accessing the internet, and it's Apple and Google. And in the case of Apple, they frankly have decided to take an approach where they're shutting down their platform and locking it down. And not only are they doing that, but they're insisting on pretty draconian rules, which then means everything from us as a competitor having to sort of post to them, let them know exactly what we're doing, although they also operate Apple Music, which is a competitor of ours. Yeah. So we have to share our plans to them beforehand. They insist on taking 30% of our revenue. And Spotify today, by the way, we pay out about 2/3 of everything we make. So if they would get 30% of our business, that means we basically would go out of business. And so it's been kind of a non-starter for us. But the most important fundamental thing here is the internet right now, we believe, should be open. It should be in the greatest interest of all consumers to have a level playing field. And so we've been advocating for quite some time that what we ought to be doing is we need to be putting the smartphone ecosystem on a level playing field, and Apple in particular needs to open up to allow us to compete, because that's not only going to be in the best interest of Spotify, but frankly, even when you look at all the creators that are on our platform, that would enable someone to sell books, for instance, on the platform without having to pay Apple 30% for the privilege of doing so. And for me, also more importantly, if you think about it in a much more broader thing, we're not just fighting for Spotify because we'll be fine at this point, but it's really about the next generation of entrepreneurs, the little tech that's kind of growing up at this moment too. And there's hundreds and hundreds of companies that have reached out to us and saying, that they appreciate the fight that we're doing and all the ways that they're being hampered on. So, I oftentimes say that we kind of were lucky that we were able to start in that era before smartphones, because if we started today, I'm not sure Spotify could have been what it is today, given the landscape, the way it works.
I mean, do you think you could even exist? Like, would you have gotten any momentum?
I don't know, but we for sure would have been severely hampered, and who knows whether we would have been able to grow to the level where we are today. I don't think so, but it's obviously impossible to know.
Of course. And do you think some of the problems that you're speaking about, do you think they will be addressed? Are you hopeful that there will be solutions, that we can see the next 100 Spotifys cropping up in the next few years?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, when I was in my 20s, there was a huge debate about net neutrality and keeping the internet open. And so it's kind of an irony that we find ourselves now 20 years later with a much more closed down internet because of how these smartphones are. And so that's why we're fighting, because we want to increase competition, because we know that's ultimately going to be good for progress. And I believe when you sit down and you speak to politicians and lawmakers, they do understand the issue and they want to make something about it. And frankly, I just hope that Apple now doesn't just skirt all the regulation that's already in place, but actually start abiding by it.
This is not a business question at all, but I'm very curious because I think it's fair to say you're probably the most successful person from Scandinavia. And it's interesting because, like, what do you think the ethos is there? Do you think that they have work-life balance figured out, or do you think that we need to sort of adopt more of that in Scandinavia, or that Scandinavia has, or do you think that maybe they should work a little harder like we do in New York?
Well, I think it's probably both and, right? So what I have to say is it's a lot. With Scandinavians, we work really hard when we do work, but when we're off, we're really off. And so my advice to even some of the people that are here in this room on my team is I often try to tell them to, when they actually take breaks, to really take breaks. So I don't think it's actually that Scandinavians work a lot less, but we are very diligent on when we're actually taking time off. It's not like we're sort of checking our emails at the same time. And I do believe that disconnecting and spending time with your family or just thinking about other things, sometimes the greatest innovations, certainly for me, have been when I'm not supposed to be thinking about work, and then all of a sudden I kind of do something completely different and I'm able to sort of connect the dots, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, actually I didn't realize, and then be able to take that back to work. So if I could say anything, it's just I think working hard is definitely a big part of Spotify and what we do, but when we're off, just take time off. And I think if you do that, you're going to find that you're going to be sharper and better at work too.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else that you can add about your favorite podcasts or what's on your playlist?
Yeah, so right now what's on my playlist is I just saw Billie Eilish. She was performing. She's just started her new tour, so just saw her with my kids. So they were very excited about that show. So that's kind of on the top of mine because she plays some of her old songs. That was a while ago since I listened to it, so I've started listening to that. And then on the podcasting side, there's one in particular called Founders. And this kind of speaks to some of the themes we've been talking about too, where you find someone who's just incredibly passionate about this very, very small thing. And then that passion just is contagious and you just feel it and you listen to it. So this guy basically, all he does is he reads biographies about some of history's greatest entrepreneurs. Everything from the South Korean guy who started Hyundai to Steve Jobs or whatever. And it's just an amazing sort of thing about wisdom, about life experience, life lessons learned. And he's so passionate that I just love listening to it.
Another very interesting thing about Spotify is that as everyone was moving to Silicon Valley, you moved to New York City. Why did you want New York to be your U.S. home?
Yeah, well, the honest truth is, I started Spotify when I was 23. And so a single guy in my 20s, New York was just a much more fun place to be than Silicon Valley. But on top of that, obviously, a lot of the music industry was either in New York or LA. And so for me, because I loved New York, I loved the hustle and bustle, the city that never sleeps. I loved the nightlife. As crazy as it sounds, there was no great strategy. It just turned out to be an amazing place to build a company. But it was totally the right thing for Spotify because this is where culture happens, I think, to a much greater extent than Silicon Valley. Although tech culture happens there, I think real culture happens in New York and LA to a much greater extent. So that's the story behind why we're here in New York. And now we have more employees in the US than we have anywhere else in the world. In fact, I think we have people in like 43 states in America.
Wow. Wow, and 17 floors here in the beautiful World Trade Center.
Indeed.
I know we're at time. Anything else that you can share with us about upcoming announcements or anything that you really want our readers or our viewers to take away from this?
Well, I think the most important thing maybe to say is that, I'm just super excited about what's going on overall in the world of music at the moment. So many great new artists that are coming around from not just US now being the #1 exporter, so in music around the world. As I mentioned, country music now becoming a global phenomenon. You mentioned yourself K-pop, so I think we're seeing a much more global music industry than ever before. And I think that's just going to lead to so much more interesting ways for people to consume music and so many more new artists coming up and making it.
That's a wrap on today's episode of New York Next. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can also catch us on the New York Post YouTube channel, and of course, be sure to follow us on social media for the latest updates and behind-the-scene content. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. Join the conversation and let us know what you think.